Clary! Clary, don't leave me!
Alec tries to plan the perfect proposal while Simon goes undercover. Let's break down Shadowhunters Season 3, Episode 17 and find out just what happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here with your weekly dose of Shadowhunters recap. So this week's episode is called Heavenly Fire, and we get to dive into the secret program that Greenlaw was trying to tell them about. And you know what? I actually kind of really enjoyed this episode and getting to see Izzy and Simon kind of at the forefront of this operation. Plus, my boy Raphael was back, even if it's just for one episode, and he got another moment to shine. And also, book fans, I think you might be happy. I don't really know because I haven't read the book, so I don't know how the character plays out in the books. But we have the arrival of Helen Blackthorn in this episode. So let's go ahead and break everything down. So first, we're going to talk about Magnus and Alec. We left last episode with Alec asking for the family ring to propose, and we start this episode with Alec being a little bit nervous, telling Magnus he wants to have dinner on the balcony at 8 p.m. just to, supposedly do something nice. But you can see that Magnus is a little skeptical, but also still having a tough time accepting the fact that he has no magic. And we see throughout the day that Alec is pretty nervous about what's going to happen later that night. And then when the date rolls around, Alec shows up, Magnus strolling in really late and also drunk. And while Magnus finally lets his feelings out to Alec about how he just isn't doing well without the magic and how it's not just a phase, he may never get over the fact that he no longer has magic, plus that he's also getting gray hairs, and that he's a has-been warlock now. He's just a straight up mess, and he tries to fight Alec and to leave, but Alec won't let him go, stops him, hugs him, lets him cry in his arms, and just says that he wants to help. And it's just so heartbreaking because you want this Malik proposal to be perfect, but they're not both in the right place at this time. So I didn't expect a proposal this episode, but I also didn't expect this emotional of a scene with Magnus just bawling in Alec's arms. So it'll be interesting to see how this relationship moves forward, because it must suck for Alec in a way, because it makes it feel like Magnus thinks magic is more important than Alec, and how you had, Alec showing Magnus that, he was more important than the magic to him. You kind of wish that was the same reciprocated, but I guess when you lose something that you've had for thousands of years that's kind of defined you, it's super hard to let that go over if you had something, maybe for a couple of years and you lost it. It's not quite as hard. At least that's my guess, but I'm really rooting for these two. Now let's move on to our Jonathan and Clary storyline. So Jonathan is still hanging out all Hannibal Lecter-like in his little cell, and he won't talk to anyone but Clary. So Clary tries to get Jonathan to tell her his plans for this Morningstar sword and how he's probably going to use it to open the realms and let out demons, and she wonders how he even heard of this sword in the first place. So Jonathan starts to tell Clary stories of when he was in Edom, and before he kind of turned into this full-on kind of evilish thing that he is now, that he had hope when he first arrived there, and especially when he first heard of Clary, that he had another sibling out there. And he also tells her of the first time he heard about the sword from Lilith, who said that was the only thing that could kind of like break him out of Edom, and it could only be used by someone with Morgenstern blood. But she pretty much told him that no one was going to love him like she would, and that no one would come for him. Now, after hearing Jonathan's stories, Clary runs to her room and grabs her old sketchbooks, and it turns out that she used to have this recurring nightmare about a prince in a burning tower that she tried to rescue because she was his princess, and every time she got near the top, she fell, and so she drew it all out in these different journals or different sketchbooks, and she realizes that Jonathan was that prince in the nightmares and she was supposed to be that princess. And now she's feeling guilt, like maybe if I could have saved him, he wouldn't be as evil as he is now and all of this. But Jace tells her that, she wouldn't have been able to change him. Then after the discovery of the Heavenly Fire Serum, which I'll talk about next, Clary goes to tell Jonathan that they found a way to fix this twinning situation, and this won't be going on much longer, which causes Jonathan to freak out and kind of like beg for Clary to spend more time with him because he has so much more to share with her, to not get rid of this rune yet. But she's just kind of like, sorry, this is the way it has to be. And then we see Jonathan cry out that Lilith was right about no one ever coming for him or loving him, as Clary walks out and just turns her back on him. And I just gotta say, Luke Baines makes Jonathan creepier and creepier every episode, which I love and I hate, but it's just so good because he does give you those chills that I think you're supposed to feel with Jonathan. Like, you don't know whether he's telling the truth or not, but you can see that there is this, he doesn't understand, and there is this love he has for Clary, and all he wants is for her to love him. And yeah, so I think he's doing a pretty good job playing this role. But now let's go to our Heavenly Fire operation. So Izzy goes to see Simon to ask for his help to save Clary, and of course Simon jumps in before he even hears what the plan is. And can we just take a moment here to appreciate Simon and Alberto? Then Izzy fills Simon and Alec in on her plan. Greenlaw's chip had a bunch of Downworlders files on it, and she notices something, that they're all being redirected from the guard to Project Heavenly Fire. So the only way to really figure out if the sword exists and what this whole thing is to have an inside man. So she wants to send Simon in undercover as Zeke Russo. Izzy will use her tracking rune to try to figure out where this secret location is, and they'll communicate telepathically with Sealy rings. And so Simon shouldn't really be in too much trouble. Izzy will be right there waiting to pounce. Well, Simon goes undercover and he's thrown into a holding room with a bunch of other Downworlders, and one of them happens to be Raphael, who he's got to be like, don't blow my cover, dude. And it seems like every few hours a prisoner's taken away but never returned. So Simon fills Izzy in on all of this, but the wards and the protection around this building are too much that the tracking rune isn't working. So Izzy has to find another way. She goes to ask Aileen for help and to try to figure out where this location is, but Aileen's not too keen on trying to help save Clary until Izzy brings up that if they can separate Clary and Jonathan, then they can kill Jonathan and Aileen can get her justice for her cousin Sebastian. So Aileen is in. She then goes and finds out that Raphael's transfer request was put in after he arrived at the garden, and that whoever was responsible for all of this, Project Heavenly Fire or whatever, is doing it behind her mother, Consul Penhallow's back. And she also reveals that the only person with a high enough clearance to be doing all of this other than her mother is none other than Victor Aldertree. Yeah, that douchebag who introduced Izzy to Yinfen. So Izzy goes to meet with Aldertree to pretend like she's trying to forgive him on her road to recovery, and tries asking him what he's up to now that he's the new head of scientific development, but he's being very secretive, but does say they're on the verge of a major breakthrough. Now back in the secret location, Raphael gets taken and Simon tries to stop them but gets zapped and passes out, and is taken to his own private little holding area where he's supposed to be held in by a ring of daylight, but I guess since they don't recognize him as Simon the Daylighter, they don't realize that's not even gonna work. But anyway, when Simon finally wakes up, the shadow hunter that's been watching him is right there asking what exactly he's up to, because she has his ring, because it uncloaked itself when he fell asleep. And Simon tries to continue, his cover, but this shadow hunter is not buying this story. And it turns out that she's half shadow hunter, half Sealy, and says that they're not there torturing Downworlders. He must be hearing things wrong. So then she goes to call her supervisor, who is of course Aldertree, to tell him about, this so-called Zeke guy, which ends up tipping Aldertree off to know that Izzy's intentions on this so-called dinner date are not what he thinks it is. And when he turns around, she's already snuck out, while Simon goes snooping around and finds the labs and ends up finding Raphael standing in the sunlight of a window in a room. And he's kind of like, wait, dude, are you a daylighter? But Raphael says no, he's now a mundane. He was injected with a serum that made him feel like he was dying, and then all of a sudden he wasn't dying. He was turned back into a mundane, and this serum has heavenly fire in it. So yeah, he thinks it's a gift, but there's another person in this room that thinks it's a theft, and oh yeah, that's Iris, who is now back as well. Aileen, meanwhile, has done some research and tells Izzy that these Downworlders are having their powers taken away from serum created by a fragment of the Glorious Sword, and that the Clave has no idea about it. It's all Aldertree, and he's doing it behind their backs, and he's planning on using this to get rid of all the Downworlders. And this prison is a trial, because then the next step is slipping it into the water supply in New York City, and then after that it's called worldwide downworlding, or whatever you want to call it. So Aileen has found these coordinates for the lab, which they send to Alec because they need to stop this before anything more happens. They do that just in time as Aldertree comes to confront Izzy and tells her to join this revolution so they can focus on saving mundanes from demons like they were meant to, and not have to worry about these Downworlders. And now as Aldertree is trying to convince Izzy, the shadow hunter that ratted Simon out returns to actually help, because she ended up hearing the message that Izzy relayed, and now she knows what Aldertree's true purpose was, and she is not there to hurt any Downworlders, especially because she is half Downworlder. So they decide they've got to stop this. Raphael's in for helping, Iris is in for helping. She goes to cause a diversion, and it's kind of like, rest in peace, Iris. Unfortunately, a sacrifice had to be made for this to happen. As Iris makes her sacrifice, the rest of them run into the lab where they lock themselves in, and we learn that the shadow hunter who's been helping them is named Helen Blackthorn, and she gives Simon some of the serum, then activates the self-destruct on the bunker where the rest of it is, We also learned that the fragment of glory is disintegrated when it was used to make this serum, so this serum's kind of their only hope of having heavenly fire. They then bring the serum back while Aileen shows up to arrest Aldertree. Izzy then plans to run some tests on the serum to see if they have enough heavenly fire that it can be used to break this twinning rune. And we also learn that Raphael and the other downworlders who are now mundanes will be getting reduced sentences. And then we get a cute moment when Jace puts his hand on Simon's shoulder as his own way of saying, "Thanks, Simon, you did a good job," because we know we'd probably never really hear Jace mutter those words. We also have Simon and Izzy having a moment calling each other badass for the work they did. And then we also have a little moment between Aileen and Helen, as Helen thinks she's now in trouble. But Aileen actually says that she admires Helen, and without her there might not be a downworld in New York anymore. And it seems like this could be the budding of something, especially since I had to, look up on Wiki who exactly Helen was, and it turns out in the books that these two are married, so that was kind of fun to see the start of a blossoming relationship on screen. But yeah, so that ends the main events of this week's recap. We now have this serum which has the heavenly fire in it, but we still don't know if this serum will actually work. But Clary's trying to bluff and tell Jonathan it will, that they have something, so fingers crossed it does work. I mean, it seemed like Michael needed that whole sword, or maybe he didn't, we just think he did. But yeah, we're making kind of progress on this de-twinning thing, but hopefully they can make it happen before Jonathan really gets his claws into Clary, because he's starting to get even creepier. And now that Clary has really turned his back, now that Clary has really turned her back on him, I feel like he's going to fight even more to try to win her over. But yeah, let's go ahead and see what's in store in the next promo.
I'm here to get Magnus, his magic, and his immortality back.
Under one condition: end your relationship. Break his heart to save his life.
It kills me that you have to be connected to Jonathan for another second. After everything that monster has done to you?
Jonathan is not a monster.
This isn't you talking.
Don't touch me!
You're trying to tear us apart, little sister. Join me.
Okay, so it looks like there is one more person to go to for Magnus's magic, and Alec goes to see Osmodeus, Magnus's dad. But of course, there's always a catch, and it's, does he sacrifice his relationship? In all honesty, it seems like I said Magnus kind of cares more about magic than Alec at this point, which makes me sad. But Alec truly loves Magnus and knows how much this magic really means to him, so we'll have to see if it's worth ending their relationship over. But maybe if they go through with it, then maybe someone can just take down Osmodeus, because we know Lilith kind of wants some revenge on him. And then Magnus and Alec can live happily ever after, right? With magic and all. We also, it seems like, have Jonathan clearly trying to get his clutches on Clary. So yeah, it's kind of going to be fun to see. We don't really have a ton of episodes left, so I feel like it is building nicely to have kind of a big, explosive, satisfying ending, hopefully. But yeah, that's it for this week's recap. So now it's your turn to hit me up down in the comments and let me know your thoughts on this week's episode. Your least favorite moments, your favorite moments. Did you like seeing Helen Blackthorn brought to life on screen? What do you think is going to happen with this serum? Is it enough heavenly fire? Is Jonathan taking over Clary? Is it too late? And what about this whole Magnus and Alec situation? Do you think by season's end we'll actually get a proposal and maybe a wedding? Maybe that could be the end of the show. Just a nice, happy Malik wedding. I don't know. But let me know all your thoughts and theories down below. And then after that, you can check out more of my interviews, videos, recaps, all that kind of good stuff right over here. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And yeah, my name's Lisa. And as always, thank you for hanging out with me and listening to me ramble. See you next time.